there was a fire that destroyed our entire lives. We left with just what we had on.
I don't know how you did it. Like, I don't know how you kept going after you basically lost all of your art. Your whole life as an artist went up literally in smoke. And for a lot of people, I think that would have been, the cliche of the straw that breaks the camel's back. But somehow you kept going. What kept you going in that moment where you lost everything?
The support of family and friends, because they did, get around us to that. We had people that were there in the moment, and that was kind of a push. But I think also being a child of war, being like, that in a weird sense, it felt familiar.
Welcome to Uptown Voices. From Harlem to the Heights to the northern tip of Inwood, we're here to celebrate our people and together seek solutions for the difficult issues we're all confronting as neighbors. Regardless of what hood you represent, we share the same goal, creating the best community we can, somewhere to enjoy, where we can build our lives and raise our children. We want to thank 181 Cabrini, located on the corner of 181st Street and Cabrini Boulevard, for its generous support for this podcast. It's your neighborhood bistro just steps away from the North Walk of the GWB. Stay tuned for a discount code that you can mention to your bartender or server the next time you visit the restaurant. We also need financial contributions from listeners like you to produce, improve, and expand our content. To contribute, please scan the QR code on the screen or visit www.livingamericana.com. That's living without a G.
Yo, what up, everyone? It's Led Black, and welcome to our third
Number 3.
episode of Uptown Voices. Number 3, Led Black and Octavio Blanco. And, this is an important month, Uptown. This is June, right? So it's the Uptown Nostro month. I got my Noma shirt on, rocking that. And, so we got to talk to the artists. And we're going to talk to this great Uptown artist today, my brother, Franck de Las Mercedes, from my Nicaraguan brother, you know what I mean? That we've been friends for a long time. Not just a great artist, just a great person. He drops, there's so much, your art, like it almost like it resonates, it vibrates with like who you are and your spirit. And every time we have a conversation, this history, this art, all these things, man. So Franck, what's up, brother? How you doing, man?
Man, I'm honored to be on this. Number 3 is a good number for me. It's my
Number
favorite,
3.
so I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Thank you, guys. And you got Octavio here, man. We go way back, as I was saying
Yeah,
before.
man. I'm so happy to have you
That's
here,
crazy.
Franck. We go way back. It was another life. I think we both worked at CNN way back in the day. You were up in the library,
Yeah.
and I was like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, fetching tapes for the producers. They would scream at me, "We need video of people making microchips," and so I'd go up to the library. "Yes, master. Do we have video of people making microchips?" "Yes, we do." And I'd be running down and with a stack of it was back when we had videotape and everything was on tape. It wasn't quite digital yet, and Franck would be there helping me.
And I remember Octavio being like one of the most calm and collected people that would go upstairs. And interestingly enough, like to say I go way back with Octavio, it was like a transitional thing where he was like, tape for this and this and that, and like and then we chit chat about life, and then he would be out, and then he'll be back like 5 times or something or whatever, depending on how busy that thing was, and that was it. Like that was life, It was quite interesting, that thing, like how and then I was actually trying to explain it to my son, like, what it's like. I know that dude since like 1996. My son was born in 2015, so he didn't register. He was just kind of like, that was
What?
forget.
Yeah. I mean, that was a life, and we were in there in that crazy time together. And now look at you. I mean, you are without a doubt a world renowned artist, and so we are honored to have you on Uptown Voices. I mean,
That's
I know
for sure.
Led. One of the first things you said to me was, "We got to have Franck de Las Mercedes," and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I know
Yeah.
him."
Interesting thing that I just learned about Octavio, right, is that I didn't know this,
Okay.
but we both got to CNN while being aspiring actors. And I don't know for him, but for me, it was just like, hey, I'm gonna do this on the side for a little bit while I try the theater thing and whatever. And next thing you know, I'm like at CNN for like whatever years, and I'm like, oh man, like, and I cracked there. But I didn't know that about Octavio, that you were an aspiring actor that was also doing the same kind of work to see if something happened for you and
Yeah,
stuff.
I came to New York. That was my goal, was to be an actor. But when it, I was telling Led, like, I think I have this, I couldn't lead that actor's life. I have so much respect for those folks who can be actors and can lead that life and, be waiters during the day and also just like take the rejection after rejection after rejection and just keep on keeping on. Like that is some, like when people talk smack about actors, they don't know the life. And I just couldn't have that kind of life. I needed some security. I needed something that I could depend on to pay my rent and stuff like that. And so, yeah, me too. I was like convinced that this was just a part-time thing.
Frank, but were you an artist at that time, Frank? Were you a working
Actually,
artist when he was?
what I
He
really
was
was a musician. I really, and I was active. I was an active musician. I was, working at a studio in Queens. Me and my buddy, we had a band. We also were producing artists. I was doing the acting and writing plays. I got to present plays. I got to be on stage. Then, art, I think, found me, in a way. Like it was just kind of an emotional thing, where I kind of like just,
so,
it got too
so wait a
much.
minute. You didn't do art as a kid. You didn't do art as a kid.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it's not like, Frank was always drawing kind of thing, or, like I had art class, or that was, like I'm always, especially here, like in the East Village, right? Like I always tell people, I can't believe I walked the streets, and not that I met them, but at the same time that some of my heroes who become my heroes, right? Like we're walking the streets here, and like, but I wouldn't have known about those guys back then, even when I came to New York, So it came later for me,
And
definitely.
I learned today when I
Really?
was going through
That's
some of the
interesting.
material that you sent me that you come from a family of musicians. Your family is involved with with music and dancing, and so that must have gotten you really involved in that side of arts.
Yeah, I mean it's all collided, right? Like when I was growing up, the thing with Masaya, where I was born, and I was a kid, is that you were kind of immersed. Masaya is considered the cradle of folklore for Nicaragua. So like that little town
Wow.
represents everything you will know about Nicaragua, so to speak, right? Like that's where the dance, the music, the art, it's referenced, right? And people have always referenced Granada for the great city that it is as well, and it's cultural. But Masaya is like the cradle of all of the Nicaraguan expression, if you will, in
That's
every.
amazing.
Yeah, and so like it's not necessarily that you had to be a musician, or it was just around you, right? And think of a world before social media and entertainment, and as we know it today, right? Where your
Yeah.
entertainment was going to the dances and seeing the people dance, or they would come to the houses, or so like I was definitely immersed in it. And much later I learned, like, no, definitely I had these artistic inclinations and aspiration because of where I grew up, in Nicaragua, and because who my family were, like doing dance, and my mom even taught dance, and it was all cultural, Nicaraguan roots, uh, arts, not necessarily something that they were studying in college or anything, but just preserving culture, and that I think definitely stuck with me.
That's fascinating. And was it a what was it? What kind of it was indigenous folklore? Like what was the makeup of
Well,
the
marimba
town?
is yeah, marimba is the dance of Masaya in Nicaragua, but also when it comes to visual arts, right, is primitivismo, which is very bright colors. So it was very natural to me to transition into painting and go for really bright colors, though they don't look exactly the same. The influence is there, and then pop art. There were a lot of things that I associated with American culture with Nicaragua, right? Like there were festivals where like the men wore makeup and dressed as women. And when I saw heavy metal and like the hair bands and the men, I was like, oh, it was not necessarily new
Know
for me.
that? Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, like it was just
Right.
kind of like, oh, okay, so this is kind of like that, right? And then like even the heavy metal solos to me were like, oh, it's like requinto, right? Which is like very, very common to hear in Nicaraguan songs, which is like the solos, right? So like all of those elements were always sort of like, then I see pop art, right? And then like the bright colors, right? Warhol and Keith Haring, and I see like the colors, and I'm like, it was just very, very seamless to me in an interesting way, despite you can say culture shock, and it was just like, oh, okay. And it kind of had an impact in me where it was just very influential in that it was more welcoming because it wasn't necessarily foreign to me.
Right. And how did that go? How did you go from Nicaragua to here? Like, what was that journey?
Well, my family had political ties because of who my maternal grandfather was. My father's family were all revolutionaries, and they were Sandinista supporters. They were the people that won, which created the exile of my maternal family for the most part. Then the revolution took over, and things started to happen with the Contra war, which was happening in the border. Then like kids just were really getting younger and younger when they came to like the people they were sending to the it was an enforced draft. And so my family, my mom got into trouble with the school system because she was a teacher, and she was kind of she was fired, and then she couldn't work. She practically had to flee Nicaragua, like without a word, like from one day to the other. Then we stayed behind, and 2 years later, we finally were able to leave Nicaragua ourselves. But that's really the story. It
Wow.
was just all the political turmoil and the war. I always tell people Nicaraguan history is American history, as you know it here. It's
Facts.
like from the
Feels
beginning.
like it's repeating itself right now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that's really my story in getting to the
And
states.
where were you? Where did your family land in the United States? Was it New York or New Jersey or somewhere else?
New York City, baby, Washington Heights. Washington. It's really, it's
Washington
really,
Heights.
it's really interesting because people think that I'm like, I just got to watch every time. Like I just got to Washington Heights. I'm like, no, I grew up here, man. 173rd Audubon, 1985. That's when we started. Like,
Fire.
yeah,
Fuego.
Supra, like Supra on the street, the music. I used to mop my building. They used to give me $30, which I was like, I'm a millionaire, man. Like, and yeah, it's the first time I heard bachata. It was Luis Segura. It wasn't even like Anthony Santos was nowhere to be found yet. It was just Luis Segura playing, and it was the
Wow.
people, right?
So, so Highbridge Pool was your backyard then,
Oh yeah, man. Like
right?
we first thing we did was go to that pool. First thing, and it's real.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I remember Highbridge Pool was for me. I'm from 192nd, so I didn't always go there, right? Because when I went there one time, I got my Patrick Ewing stolen, right? And then I had to steal someone else's sneakers because I wasn't walking to 193rd barefoot, right? But what was funny is that my favorite part of on Highbridge was going at night. Like, cause it was you could go there. It wasn't that much beef at night, and everyone was kind of like it was really cool, man. So tell me about having hybrids as your backyard. That must have been amazing.
Well, it was good. I mean, the thing is, it uh, Audubon was live. You know that. It was like it was
It's
very
still
hectic.
live.
Like yeah, and then I'll never forget we just gotten to New York, literally from like Newark Airport. We get to New York, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna go to the pool. There's a pool," and I'm thinking like, "Oh my God, people live large here already, right?" This is after I'm looking for like, this is after I'm like looking
That's
for the
hilarious.
gringos because I'm like, where are the gringos at? I don't see the American people. Like, everybody speaks Spanish.
That's not what I saw on TV. That's not what I saw on TV.
So then, but I swear to you, a shootout in like right on the corner where the dude, which I can't believe that guy's still there. If it's not the same guy, the van with the coconuts and the caña and like
Hmm.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Oh my
like
God. Your
and
first day. Your first day.
first day, and then I remember I'll never forget. I asked or told him I was like, so there's a revolution here. Like I mean, I didn't know we had landed in New York's crack epidemic and AIDS, like all the
Right.
stuff that was happening in New York City, and so it was like culture shock in a way that I didn't even expect. You know what I mean?
Right, right. You went from the frying pan right into the fire. Like,
Yeah.
ooh, here we go. That's fascinating, right? Like, but again, maybe what you went through prepared you for New York too, though, right? Did you become a fan of these artists before or when you got to New York? Because, like you were saying, you came right in the middle. Like, you came in that cultural explosion, crack, but also art, right? Everything was happening at once, good and bad, which is an interesting time.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was New York. New York was the catalyst and the impact, going into a subway for me was a visual experience. I mean, now that we're talking, I keep saying this, we're talking about immersive experiences, but walking into a subway cart in the 1980s was just magical to me. Like, I was like, everything was art. Like, you sat in, and so like now people create these rooms where there's art everywhere, and like it's all around it. And for me, it was just like impactful to see that. So I think that what was happening was all kind of I was being influenced by all of my surroundings and my backdrops and the walls and the ads, everything about New York.
And what like keeps you in Washington Heights? Like there's been, you've changed, you've grown, you've got a family now.
It really the true answer is it's home. When I moved back in 2014, because the thing is I lived in New Jersey for a while, but I always kept coming back to Washington Heights. I kept coming back. I started taking photos before I started making art. I was just taking photos. I wasn't necessarily saying I'm a photographer, right? Which is Paloma, the picture that I have of Paloma. That's like 2002. So that was not even
Wow.
me living in New York. It was just me a stop to seeing the hood. I wanted to see home and like. But when the fire happened in 2014, there was a fire that destroyed our entire lives. We left with just what we had on. We were looking
Right.
for apartments. My wife was just like, we were looking all over. And then at some point, I was just kind of like, look, nothing is going to replace the sense of security or comfort or. And I was kind of like, I think I should go home. And that's the way I thought about it. You know what I mean? Not that I was saying it, but part of me was like, I think I need some familiarity, to
Right. Right.
go
That's
back
deep.
to. Yeah. And that's
It was a
that's
call
really
to
the
you.
answer.
You
And
felt
that's what.
called.
Huh?
No, you felt called. It was like you felt like I need to go home. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
I
it
feel
took a
that.
while. The transition was really hard because we come into like this big empty apartment. There was echo because we had nothing. We had to start all over again. But though it was still like, oh my God, that happened. It was still a sense of like, at least I'm home. Like at least there was a familiarity that I think I needed. And then the irony. I don't know if the irony is the right word, but to come back to Washington Heights with nothing again, once as an immigrant. And then,
Right.
that was very symbolic. And I think I cherish it because of it as well.
It was a reset almost, right? Like you had no
Yeah.
choice but to go forward, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. Were you an artist at that time, or were you just taking pictures at that time?
No, no. By then, I'm an artist. In 2014, I'm already
You're
official
doing
artist.
art.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
lost all the art you've done. You lost all
Everything.
the art goes up in flames.
Yeah.
Oh
Everything.
wow.
Because we used to have a loft and I had a storage space within it. And so everything completely
Well,
gone.
I think you and I were talking about this, Frank, a little bit before. It's like, I don't know how you did it. Like, I don't know how you kept going after you basically lost all of your art. Your whole life as an artist went up literally in smoke. And for a lot of people, I think that would have been, the cliche of the straw that breaks the camel's back. But somehow you kept going. And I want to hear a little bit because I'm going to find inspiration for myself from what you're about to tell me, right? Like what kept you going in that moment where you lost everything?
I think one of the things that the support of family and friends, because they did, get around us to that we had people that were there in the moment, and that was kind of a push. But I think also being a child of war, being like that in a weird sense, it felt familiar. Like the fact that when we were in Nicaragua during the war, the revolution in '79, we were practically nomads at one point. My mom, my sister, and I, just looking for our other family because we didn't know if they were dead, if they were, and we actually walked to another town to look for them. And so those experiences, I think, for me, as traumatic as they were, and it's their experiences of loss, of leaving everything behind. When you live Nicaragua, and Nicaragua, leaving Nicaragua is not like we'll be back on vacations. It was just a complete, like, where nothing
Right.
of me exists over there. There was a
Right. A
kind
complete
of a
severance.
repeat,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, like, and it's interesting that you say that because I've heard of other artists that they were like, I don't know what I would have done, man. I probably would have killed myself or something like that. And I was just kind of like, no, I'm gonna stick around and do this. I'm gonna keep going, and I'll never forget. I saw ashes. I went back to the site where the fire happened. It was gone completely. The next day, the place was gutted, and it was raining. And then the wind blew, and I saw chunks of charcoal of like the whole fire. And I remember taking them in kind of a plastic thing that kind of an urn. And I started drawing with that. I started using that, and I started
Wow.
mapping it in the paint to start creating again. And what I first started doing was portraits of anything that crossed my path. It wasn't about honoring anybody. It wasn't. It was just I wanted to work like a machine, just get back and not think about what was happening to me emotionally, because I knew I could have gone to a really dark place. So the only way that I could have mourned in a way, like the loss, was through making more art, not through, you know what I mean, not sitting down
Deep.
to just, yeah,
That's
to just
deep.
so it
And
was
So
just
yeah.
work.
and your wife was pregnant
Yeah.
at the time, right? Is that also if I
No, that was the other part, right? Like, she was such a trooper throughout the whole thing, right? She was like, oh my God, we saw like 30 apartments. This is a crazy story. The apartment where we live now, we were shown accidentally first. The very first apartment we saw was like, right, and we walk into this thing, and it kind of ruined the whole thing because it was a humongous apartment, and I was like, oh my God. So the guy messed up. But anyway, we saw 30 apartments, in like a month's time. I was like, dude, my feet are hurting, bro. Like, she was a trooper, man. She just wanted to make this happen. And I think that in part also it was her support to make sure that I was working again and that we had space,
Right.
and so part of it was that too, that I had, that we had support.
That's amazing. To me, it sounds like it's like a phoenix rising from the ashes, right? Like quite literally, right? Like
Yeah.
and the fact that it became therapeutic for you, right? Art was how you coped. You know what I mean? And that's talk a little bit about that. Like you said, you would just draw, but what were you think? So you just stopped thinking and you would just work like more like machine. That what it was?
Yeah, I would just work because the thing is, I am very analytical, and I also go really like ruminate inside my head a lot, and I do that, naturally. Just so I knew I was going to go into like a really deep, deep place. But what happened was that in the middle of all that, after she months later becomes pregnant, and so that was became about the baby. So it was like a
Right.
tremendous, beautiful interruption, right? Like a blessing. And Luca means he who brings light, and so that's what we named
Wow.
him Luca, because
Oh, that's beautiful.
so yeah, so all these poetic things happened throughout the ordeal as well that were life changing, and that became fuel or motivation to continue, right, and to move forward.
So how do you think your art changed, right? Like what was the art that burned down? What was the difference between that art that you made and the new art that you made?
That's a great question because a few people tell me we're very curious to see how your art is going to change, but it wasn't the fire. It was my son who got me out of my head. When he was a baby and like he would be looking at the light bulb. He was always very alert. He'd be looking at the light bulb and like yelling or fighting with it or whatever he was doing. And I would be like, yeah, what a miracle, right? A light bulb, right? Like everything I did up until that point was very emotional and inside of me and in my head. And from that point forward to the point where I am now, he got me to look outward and look at other people and look at I think, and interestingly enough, mobile heights, right? I always took photographs, but mobile heights is really, it starts me taking photographs when I'm walking around with him with the stroller. Because my wife would go to work eventually. She went back to work. So I would take him to the park. and I'm like, I got to do something. Like, I cannot stay doing nothing creatively. So I would bring my cell phone, and if you notice, like the series, most of the photographs are shot from his point of view. They're shot from like, so he's in the stroller, he's little. They're not shot me here.
That's
I
funny.
never took a photo here. I would just take them from like his point of view, and like you could see it in the
That's
photographs. Like,
fascinating.
yeah.
That's fascinating.
And so I did
Now I
that
can see
from
it.
I did that from like 2014 to, well, 20. I always took photos, like I said, but I went heavy with where I called it from like 2015 to like 2020 or something like that with the pandemic, and then I was just kind of like, okay, it's time to ease off on it. And
Right.
yeah, that's how it came about.
Well, what do you mean you went heavy with it? You were out there taking photos every day. What is?
Oh, I was just actively taking photographs, and I get some of them. I don't know if I should share these, but some of them were actually like me catching people's attention, not them not being aware that I had the phone in my hand. So I'll be like, "Hey, Luca," and click, 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 and take the photo and walk away.
That's
Also,
hilarious.
people don't notice you with a stroller. Like you're so, it's really interesting that like people were so unassuming. Uh, like people don't assume anything about a person with a stroller, right? They're just kind of like, so it would be perfect. Like people would just be, in a sense, posing. They were like ready for a picture. I actually have a few pictures of people doing Dios te bendigas. I have to go through the archive to
That's
just like
hilarious.
yeah, categorize these things, because there were people that would stop and go like, Dios lo bendiga, and like I would take pictures of that.
That's wild. And it's funny because you mentioned Paloma, but for those that don't know, we got to give the full context of who Paloma is. So for those that don't know, Paloma is like a Washington Heights legend. His name is General Paloma Palomino, right? And he was a figure. He died last year. Rest in peace. The family was amazing, but he's a figure, like you said. He was a constant presence in Washington Heights, walking down the whole all of uptown, really. And I mean, this guy used to dress to the nines. You never saw him repeat an outfit, and everything he had a paloma on it. It had a bird on it. That was his name.
He was always
And he was an eccentric figure,
yeah.
spotless. Like he coordinates. Like he was spotless. So how did that picture happen? Because that picture, that's a young paloma. What year was that?
That was 2001, I believe.
Wow.
2001.
Wow.
But what's interesting about that photo is that I came uptown in the morning for Mangu, and like, and
That's funny.
what's crazy about the picture is that he's coming with his like the round chair, which is what he's sitting on, like
Right.
the chair that looks like a cane with the, and I didn't know his
Yeah.
name, but I remembered him from way back. So I was like, oh my God, this guy's still around, right? And like, so he
Hmm.
sits down, and I'll never forget this. I go, can I take your picture? And he goes very military, like, like he was just like, and posed and gave that shot. I mean, like I didn't have to tell him. And it's one shot. It was because he was just so perfect, right? On film.
That's amazing.
And like
One
he just,
shot.
yeah, and it was just like, and it's perfect. It's like, and always people ask me like, who is that guy, man? Like that's really interesting. He was always, I would describe him as a dandy, like the uptown dandy. You know what I mean? Because of the way he
For
dressed,
sure. For
always
sure.
sharp, and always spotless.
Always spotless. And like you said, he would carry the chair that looked like a cane. So when he got tired, he just pull up the chair and sit down. And I'm telling you, everything had a paloma on it. Seriously, like his lapels, his tie, immaculate in a way that you rarely see. Like he was definitely one of those figures. And like you said, people that don't know him are struck by the way he looked. But for people that grew up here, that guy was a fixture. Like when he passed, it was almost like an end of an era. So rest in peace
Yeah,
to Paloma, and that picture kind of really captured for him for all eternity. I think it's probably there's a lot of great pictures, but that one stands out. It really does.
definitely.
Had no idea about this. I'm compared to you two guys, I'm a newbie. Like I arrived in 1998, so like I'm still fresh, a new guy. But I wonder if anybody has did any like research on who he was, Paloma.
He has a YouTube channel. Yeah, yeah. He has a YouTube channel, and he's talking. And there's a video where he actually let pigeons into his
Yeah.
apartment, which is a little weird, right? But his apartment is full of pigeons, and they would leave, and he was feeding them. And I was like, wow, okay. So he was, it was
Yeah.
kind of interesting. It was,
Oh,
but he has a channel,
wow,
he has a
that's so
YouTube
cool.
channel with
Well,
old
listen,
videos.
Frank,
So
I want to get a little bit of a timeline about your work and your art, your, because I remember way back when, or I guess it's way back when. We keep saying way back when, but it's not that far away, that long ago. But I do remember one of the things that I think was so interesting that you used to do with these little love boxes. I don't know. So yeah, so
I
can we
got one
talk a
back
little
here.
bit about your just
Yeah.
like your trajectory? When did you sort of break out and become someone of who's known? What were you doing? And what's happening with those boxes, and what have you been doing, more recently?
So how it goes is I started painting professionally, right? Like if we can call it that way then, but in 2002 is when I started exhibiting. And it's full of full circles because I started exhibiting here in the East Village and Lower Manhattan because remember 9/11, it was dead down here. It was like they were trying to revitalize this and like this whole thing that
Right.
happened downtown, they owe it to artists because they were like they would let you hang art anywhere, a restaurant, a bar. They were trying to just come back up. So I am in that wave of artists that were revitalizing, so to speak, Lower Manhattan
Fascinating.
after 9/11, right? Like the tower wasn't even built yet. Like it was still people didn't want to come down here, so they were again, as they always do, tap into artists to try and get people to come to this place. So I started then. Then eventually, around 2005, I started trying to make money, and I did. This is when you still could sell art on eBay. And what I did was I took this photography book, got a pseudonym, and started painting portraits of Hollywood, of old Hollywood, like Warhol, like in the style of Warhol. And so, to my surprise, they start selling like hotcakes. I started getting commissions. I was, as life goes, I became a little bit depressed because I was like, oh my God, now I got the pseudonym. It wasn't for it to last, it was just to make a buck. And now I'm painting and it's taking my time and I'm shipping stuff and I got stacks of, and in that, because I was painting abstract for my work, I would paint abstract on the boxes that I was shipping these paintings. So at the post office, and this is in Union City, New Jersey, at the Union City post office, they would be like just looking at me like, who is this guy? Because I would be full of pain. Because I was busy. This was like, it became like a business. Um, and with these boxes. And then one day, like around 2006, a lady at the counter goes to me, did it ever occur that your boxes are works of art? And I was like, wow, there's something
Wow.
there. I was like, there's something there. And I don't know what it is, but there is something there. And it came about very quickly where like I went back home. I took just random boxes, I painted them, and then I started thinking like, what would I do? What would I do to make an impact, right? And then the Iraq War being still very live, like still happening, still. And so I was like, peace. Let the content of this box be peace. What would you do if peace came in the box? Well, and especially we were beginning to get really, really over digitized, so to speak, and I get really into I mean, Instagram wasn't there just yet, and like Facebook wasn't even there just yet.
Right.
But
It was
I
the
think
very
what we
beginnings of that whole thing. Yeah.
yeah, it was just beginning to gel, and it was wild because I never even thought that it would take off like it did because they just became conversation pieces where people would go, "Where is that? What is that?" And they would talk about the box, and that was the point that people started talking about the piece and our ability to influence change directly where we are as people. So that's really my beginning and where I get noticed as an artist. And I was doing this completely independently. I did it for 10 years, and they still make a comeback for like special events and things like that. They haven't in a while, uh, and it was all done out of pocket, out of love, out of donations from people. Uh, I wanted it to be that, there were sponsorships that wanted to help, but also wanted the label on the box to be,
Branding,
and I
right?
wanted people to get away from that, and some thought it was a foolish thing to do, but I'm proud to have ended it that way, where it never got contaminated by corporate branding, on them as it was, except for a PBO uh, sponsorship, which was great. It was just the paint, and they would always say, just put our label whenever you're doing the workshop, whenever you're, just give us shout outs on social media. They were cool about
Right.
that. Like I'm always grateful for them. But that's the story of the peace
And
boxes.
you would send them to people? Is that what you would mail them to
Yeah, completely free without charging them a
to
cent.
to who? To
It was
who would you
quite an
who would you
experience.
mail them to?
Well, the thing was that they just took off. It became a thing where I had to. If I would have thought about that, if I would have sat down to think about it, it wouldn't have been a happen. I had to create a page for them. I had to create a site where you would go and request them, because the thing is, they just uh, took off. I remember I put on Craigslist as the experiment. I put it on Craigslist
Wow.
project, and I wake up and I'm in shock. I get 100 requests for boxes. I take it down. I start shipping the boxes, and then from there it became a thing where like I got the call from the first newspaper, and then I got the call from the first magazine. And this is where like one of the things that I always like think of fondly is when like magazines still mattered when that started. So there were like like articles that I cherish because of that, and it just took off from there,
That's
and it
amazing.
became about, yeah, it just snowballed. It really, I didn't have to do much. I mean, it took for people to go to Thanksgiving to their family, and someone had ordered that box, and they were like, "What is that box?" And they had a conversation about that box, and then next thing you know, the people that went there were
Wow.
emailing. Yeah, it was that intense, man, and that
What was
powerful.
one of the strangest places you sent? What was one of the strangest places you sent a box to?
Death row, death row, and he made a
Death
death row,
row.
and like, yeah, and his chaplain uh, wrote for him. He was also an artist, and he wanted a box to give to leave to his daughter. Yeah, I
Oh
have.
my
Wow.
God, Frank, you
Me
my head
too.
up. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and the craziest thing is that I used to print like a lot of the emails, because the idea was to create maybe like a keepsake coffee book or something like that, which not, it's just work. Everything is work, but yeah, there were. I have a lot of wild stories with those boxes. Like the way that people would open up um, their feelings, and yeah. But that would be the weirdest place that I had sent the box to.
How many did you in total you think you shipped out?
Counting the fact that I did workshops where, like, I kept count, and I was able to keep count only because eventually I had like a specific place that I would order the unpainted boxes from. I counted over 18,000 boxes worldwide, 60 countries.
My goodness.
Yeah. Because the thing is, I used to also paint them on the floor, like a huge painting, like a humongous. And so, like, they were all like from one big painting, and I could do up to, I remember I got to do up to 50 at a time, where I was just painting like Jackson Pollock on the floor. And then, like, yeah, then, like, I try to keep doing. By the time the fire happened, I still had a humongous waiting list, and eventually just got really, really hard to do it. Shipping got more pricey and more. Some places were getting troublesome because they were empty, and they wanted to know why I was sending an empty box. So, uh, but it was an amazing experience. And one time I remember, like towards the end, uh, they were like, the reporter was like, did it ever occur to you that you were encouraging people to take selfies before? Because the gig was if I send you a box, you just send me a picture with your box. And that's what I have, a bunch of people with like their boxes. And he was like, did it ever occur to you that you were like pioneering selfies, in a sense, by
Yeah.
doing that with people? I was like, oh, I never thought of that. Like, I don't want to claim things
It's
like
true.
that.
You were,
Yeah.
yeah, no, but you were very at that cusp of the change, right? Where we were going from that paradigm shift, right? Where we were going from whatever we were like analog to digital almost, and you were there, right? And
Yeah.
it's true though, and it's also the virality of it. That's one of the first. That's a viral art phenomenon, right? That you were involved with, right? Like that's amazing,
Yeah.
and
And
because it was word of mouth, and then it got to the press, like that's amazing.
it
Wow.
was, and I was very naive in that, like, I didn't, and this is why also I needed to end it, and it needed to be that, because I needed to grasp the impact, not for me or look at me and what I did, but it was more of like, I'm proud to say that it was a thing of service for people. It was a gateway to art, to people that didn't necessarily think they could come close to art, you know what I mean, or go to a museum. And then on the other hand, in the tradition of male art, which has been done before, right? No one had done like painted box. And then on top of it, it just became like a thing where like someone it already appeared in a book as an art movement.
Wow.
And I was naive. I didn't expect that. I didn't set out to, this is what's going to make me, you know what I mean? Or it's just something that continues to this day. One of the big things that happened for me was that it got written on selecciones in Latin America, which I don't
Yeah.
know if and
Eh,
that
Describe
was
for our
huge
audience
because
what selecciones.
as a kid,
Describe what selecciones is before you get into, because I don't think everybody knows.
selecciones is Reader's Digest, but it's kind of, I couldn't describe it myself, but to me it would be like it's a magazine, but it would be sort of like a mini encyclopedia, so to speak, right? Like a journal, but that it had knowledge, it had culture, it had science, it had politics,
Information you have to
and
know.
like for my family, for my Nicaraguan family, that was humongous. That was like, you got named on the
You
Bible.
made it.
You got, no, not made it, but like
You made it.
your name is in the Bible, man. Like, so that was one of the big ones, and the wave that came from Latin America from that, I'll tell you a funny story. I never thought of myself as Latino artist, Latin American artist, and I just didn't think of it when I was coming up with a group of artists. We were Latino, we were Afro American, we're like, but we weren't necessarily like thinking about things, right? Like, we were young, and then eventually, though, like, it was almost as if Latin Americans and Latinos were like, no, we're claiming this one. Well, this is ours, right? Like, I think it got to be that thing where, like, uh, Latinos and Latin, they were just happy to see this kind of cultural movement being sparked. You know what I mean? That they could also do, because a lot of teachers are still doing them. Uh, Centers are still doing them, are making them. So, it's been very rewarding too.
That's amazing. That means like you created a thing.
Led, I think now it's time to take a short pause so that we can pay some of the bills, right?
You want to tell them a little about donations and how they could help the show?
Absolutely. We can't do this without contributions from our viewers. You're going to see a QR code in the screen here, which you can scan, and that's going to take you to a contribution site where you can make a contribution towards Uptown Voices. It's going to be helpful for us to be able to elevate our production. We have dreams and aspirations of doing live shows. We have dreams and aspirations of being on location at our various cultural institutions, and we can't do that without contributions from viewers and listeners like you. And we also can't do that without our sponsors. And this pilot season, this first episode of our pilot season, we are lucky to have a great sponsor, 181 Cabrini. It's our neighborhood bistro. Both Led and I are just steps away from 181 Cabrini, and we love it. 181 Cabrini is located right there on that corner of 181 and Cabrini, just steps away.
181 in Cabrini.
Just steps away from the bridge. So yeah, I love it. Led, you and I were there the other night.
Yeah, and we also met there for the first time. You and I, the first time we met, we had like lunch there. and it's my local bar now. Like since you and I both live like right around. It's my local bar. I spend a lot of times there. James Lee, the owner, is just an incredible restaurateur. Right, I think he's a great guy. He's super funny, but like the food is on point. Please hit up when Cabrini. It is really one of my favorite spots. But yeah. What they want Cabrini. The sangria is amazing. Everything in it. Oh, and you have to try the coconut bread pudding. They got coconut, they got chocolate, and now they got banana, but the coconut, outstanding. So like I said, the attention to detail for me is a great neighborhood joint. Thank you to James and Wonder Cabrini for sponsoring this episode. And, if you want to sponsor, holla at my boy. You know what I mean? Let's make it happen. You know what I mean?
I just want to say one thing. We're going to have a redemption code at the end of this episode, which you can bring to 181 Cabrini for a special treat.
But yeah, without further ado, though, let's get to it. Let's do it. Frank, you should be very proud of yourself. That's pretty effing amazing. Anyway, so what are you doing now? I know you're talk about Art in the Ave and your involvement with them as well as what you're doing now.
Well, I've been working at a space in the East Village. I call it the East Village Underground. Art on the Ave has been very supportive in providing me with a space to create and trusting me with do this series of works, which is what I'm doing now, which I call You Are Here. And it's about the history of the East Village and what these structures and buildings were before they became homes or apartments, rather. And so I've been telling the story of some of these buildings, like the first gallery in the East Village, which was the Fun Gallery, where Basquiat got his start, where Keith Haring got his start. And then I am also talking about the Lenape people, who are the original New Yorkers, and their ingenuity in which they built homes. And the fact that even when the settlers came, it already looked kind of like a small city because of the way they were building longhouses, what they call longhouses and wigwams. And so for me, it's important that people understand not only the history of the first New Yorkers or the first New Yorkers, but also how in a city like New York, which is synonymous with ingenuity and technology, and like our ancestors here were already thinking about this stuff, communal living. It was just incredible what they were doing. They were doing it with materials that fell, that the nature gave. They weren't like cutting down trees, rather. They were waiting for nature to do what it does and take its course to then build houses out of what nature was giving them. So like more sustainable than that, you know what I mean? In an era where we're talking about all of that sustainability, communal. They were at the helm of that. They were powerful in
They were masters
genius.
at that, yeah.
Yeah.
And for those who want to see one of these Lenape homes, there's one at the Inwood Nature Center that's been recreated there, so you can go and check it out and see how how the natives lived. It's pretty interesting stuff.
It's very cool. Yeah.
And Frank, so that exhibit, we could go see that now. It's on display now.
Here, yeah, at the space you can, and the thing is that it's interactive. You look at the picture, and then you have a QR code where it takes you to a video, and it's really cool because it's just open and it gives you the history on your phone. And like we got everything. What's that?
What's the name of the exhibit, Frank? What's the name of the exhibit, and what's the address too?
You are here, and the address of the Art on the Ave Creative Space East Village is 98 East 4th Street. So it's 98 East 4th Street. It's easy to get to. The A to West 4th, jump on the F, and then it will leave you on 2nd Avenue. So it's on 4th and 2nd Avenue. And we'll greet you here. It's awesome. It's developing really well. I'm still working on it. I am now working on the story of I want to do, are you familiar with LA2? Angel Ortiz, Little Angel Ortiz. Okay, well.
No, I don't know who that is.
Little Angel Ortiz is important because he gave Keith Haring the rhythm. So El Latino gave Keith Haring rhythm because he was a 16-year-old that used to see Keith Haring around the neighborhood and approached him. Actually, no, he was like 13 or 12 or something. He used to see him and he's like, yo, you need to put like these little things so they look like they're dancing. And like he used like all the motifs that you see of Keith Haring around it. were brought by Angel Ortiz, LA2.
What?
Yep, you
That's
can look this up.
crazy.
And then another one that I want to work on, because this is a labor of love, but I want to tell the story, and it's an Uptown story, and I think that you guys got to talk about this one. I want to see if I can talk to Al Diaz. Al Diaz, who is known as part of Samo, the other side of Samo, right? But the interesting story about Al Diaz is that before he started doing graffiti, before he brings all of that to the table, he takes it from his cousin who lived in Washington Heights, because the strength
What?
of of the graffiti movement as we know it today, which is tagging, really, it was tagging, starts really
Right.
gaining force in Washington Heights with the Greeks, Cubans,
Right. Taki 183.
Dominicans, and Puerto
Yep.
Ricans. And so there's a great documentary that I recommend that you guys see. It's called Wall Riders. You find it on YouTube. It's called Wall Riders. And it gives you the history of New York City graffiti, but it starts at
Yeah, I
Washington
just saw.
Heights. And the first report of like,
I
yeah,
was gonna just say, I just saw at the Whitney
go
they
ahead.
had a bunch of these wall riders just like a couple of weeks ago, and I watched them. I really do think that we need to do something with them, because it was like they were all just talking about Washington Heights history. It was just they're from Washington Heights.
And there's like, yeah, and that, interestingly enough, right, the one that came to prominence because he became a messenger and he brought it downtown is Taki 183.
Taki, right?
Yeah, Taki
Yeah,
183,
183. That's
a
right.
Greek kid on 183rd Street, right? It's a Greek guy. But when they asked him, where did you get, why the number? Why did the number? It's like, oh, it was the street. But it's like, but why the number? Why do you guys start doing streets? Like, we don't know. It was this immigrant Colombian kid named Julio, and it was either Julio, I forget the street number, but it was like Julio
Yeah,
214
yeah.
or Julio or
167 or
207
something like that. Yeah,
or Julio
yeah,
207 something.
yeah,
It was this kid from Colombia. He used to do it, and then he
yeah.
disappeared. But we took it from him. So like it came from this like Colombian immigrant, man. And they'd say like he barely spoke English, and like, that's an interesting story,
Absolutely,
like,
absolutely.
It really is. Yeah. And it's funny because people don't remember, like, I caught the tail end of there was a huge Greek community here. Like it was funny because another thing people don't realize about Washington Heights is that our pizza wasn't Italian. Our pizza was Greek. It was Greek people making the pizza in this neighborhood. You know what I mean? And it was interesting. So it was funny, like certain blocks. So 183rd, but all the way on Wadsworth was that Greek building, and then on the other side on Amsterdam, like by 189, 188, that was like a few other Greek buildings. But then we had a really strong Greek community. Like before it became very Dominican, it was like a
If you
melting
look,
pot
if you
of the
look
whole
at some
world.
of the,
yeah,
if you look at some of the pharmacies, it'll say etkina. That's a Greek word for pharmacy.
Yeah,
I didn't
no,
know
for
that.
sure.
I've seen it, but I didn't know that.
Yeah. So now, so I want to go back a little bit to also to tell us a little bit about what you're working on next, because I think that it's got a lot to do with you. We were talking, when I was asking you to come on about the fire and how you lost so much in the fire, and it sounds to me though that also that you never had a chance to really kind of, we've been talking about how much outwardly you were looking at the world outside of you, but you didn't have a lot of chance to like really internalize or process your loss, because number one, you have to find a new place to live. Then your baby was along the way, and then you started working and you actually hit it with these paintings that you were doing, and then you got the piece boxes, and you were working on this at this like intensity. I think it sounds like an intensity that it's really hard for people to comprehend, the sort of artistic stamina that you must have had, but you probably didn't get a chance to really process what you'd lost. So now it sounds like maybe you're coming around to that. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, I did the residency, and I do owe this to doing this residency with our on the app, because I did the Inwood. They invited me to do Inwood, and then they asked me if I wanted to be at the World Trade Center at the Oculus. And
At the
I said,
Oculus, right?
sure, right? And that experience, I came in wanting to do something completely different. Like I wanted to do paintings. I had done Uptown Arquetípico, which was really cool, and like people loved it Uptown.
Right.
And then I said I want to do something similar, but with the commuters, right? And I started working on from photographs, but I wanted to do paintings of commuters, and it got started. But what was interesting is that I couldn't shake 9/11. Like I couldn't shake where I was
Mm.
and the ground that I was standing on. And the place vibrates in an interesting way. It's very energetic, and I mean the aura of the place, the Oculus as a building, right? Like it was just being there, and it was like it's just a lot of energy, right? And like then you think about what happened.
It's jarring.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like so I was thinking
Yeah.
about the tragedy, the fire, and I was like, it's really weird because I've never really looked back. I have these files of stuff that got lost. That is, the photos don't have very good resolution because they were filmed, and it was when you used to develop them at the pharmacy into CDs, and the fact that the negatives were gone in the fire. And then I was like, what if I just tried a few things digitally? I had these journal pages, and I started just collaging digitally, and I started pairing a photograph with a journal page, right? And like, boom, it was just magical, like a revelation of like visual memory, but in a way also language. And it was having the conversation with me younger in a way, because it's not my words now. It's not necessarily what I think now, how I view the world now, but it just works in some way where like people have responded to this series, which I call contil. Contil is a Nicaraguan word for soot, for the residue that when you come out of a fire, right? And the metaphor that I found from
Deep.
that, huh? Yeah, like I
That's deep.
found that it wasn't because I was really annoyed by always looking back. I would always find myself looking at the folders and what am I going to do with this? I almost pressed delete a few times, and I was like, you know what? Let me just.
So glad you
What do
did.
I want that for? Then because I read a lot about art history, there's a history, a tradition, if you will, of artists destroying their work. So I'm like, if they got destroyed anyway, why not destroy the digital files? Which now I'm glad I
Right.
didn't
The
do.
remnants.
Yeah. And so one day I just started messing with it. I had the support of fellow artists in our on the app who were looking at it throughout the whole thing, and they were like, "You got something here. Like you got to do this. You have to do this, right?" And I was like, I was more concerned about how it was going to affect me or may have affected me looking back at all this stuff, and it hasn't. It actually it's been very rewarding to resolve this stuff through the story that I'm telling, and not to mention, and this part I didn't see coming until the first few people started walking into the space and seeing this work. It's such a tribute to New York City and to people from New York, and like true New Yorkers, sort of like if you will, like true New. You know what I mean? Like, and people have walked in and gone like,
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
people have said things to me like, I know that guy, not that he knows the person, but like I know that person or I've been that person.
Right.
Oh, that reminds me, and I never expected that like that, and that to me has been that is I think the rewarding element that art has. That we have to be a mirror for people, not necessarily look at me, look at my work, in the image culture that we live in, the self image, where we're like,
Mhm.
so it's self consuming to me. We're like, look at me, look at me, look at me, but people are seeing
Mhm.
themselves and they go like, I appreciate that. I really like the
Right.
fact that you are showing people like me, and it
Right.
just took it further to where like Optima Archetypical people were saying like, yeah, this is me, this is our community. But this one has been sort of like a mirror, for people. So I really appreciate it for that.
And it's funny because politically we're entering an era where like art is supposed to be like a nice to have, right? But it shows you that art is much more than that. Like, how as an artist, you've been through so many fires, but I hate to tell you, and I know you know this, Frank, you entering another fire right now, right? We're in a fire since this guy has been elected, you in the fire as well. We all in the fire. The whole world's on fire. How do you combat that? How do you deal with that? Like, how do you not go crazy with everything this guy comes out this guy's mouth? Like, how do you maintain yourself and how do you resist?
I, you know, I stick to my practice, and I think it's a moment where, and I always say this to fellow artists. I'm like, we have to pick our battles and see where we serve best. Do you know what I mean? Like I know where I serve best. I know where I battle. I know my strength. Do you know what I mean? I can speak through my work, and I see how it's affecting people, because art has to be effective, not effective, like, but like affect people, right? And in positive ways. I think that the artist that is doing things that make people smile is as important as the artist that's making people think, because some people need a break, right? So like, not all of us need to be fighting. We are needed in different elements, or saying different things for different segments of people. We have to be like really smart, really committed to our practice. It has to find us working, and we have to continue to work. And I love this. I keep thinking of this when I say this, and it's the best way I can explain it. I love this anecdote of Dr. King, where at the time of like the march, the I don't recall if it was the crossing of Selma, or the, like the bridge. I forget the name. Forgive me, because
Right.
but
Yeah,
I'm
no, I
rambling.
got you.
But black, there wasn't Black Hollywood, but the black actors in Hollywood were calling and saying, Dr. King, we want to join. Like, where do we go? What do we do? And Dr. King actually said, no, 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 no. Your presence in Hollywood is the resistance. I don't want you to come to the protest. I want you to I don't I want you to be in Hollywood. Your presence is the
Right.
resistance there. Your very presence, your very image in a movie, in a film. And so I found that really inspiring, because that taught me, yeah, Frank, you can't, if I can't debate, I'm not gonna debate. I'm not gonna, do you know what I mean? If I can hold my own on that, but I know where I can hold my own uh, with art.
Right.
And I think that that's what artists need to do in order to, because we need our voice, right? Like, we need our voice. We need to also be mindful of the org and support the orgs that are giving us the platform, because they're the ones that are actually giving us the ground where we need to
Right.
express ourselves. Like Noma, like our concern is not only for us as artists, but it should be for the orgs that have supported us for 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 many years, right? And that they still exist. I mean, when Sesame Street is under threat, like, that tells you something about. I mean, when an institution of that magnitude is under threat, right? Like, we have to think about what's going to happen with you know. And so, like,
Right. It's fun. No, I was gonna say it's so true that like no, go ahead, Frank. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. So for me, is that right? Like, where the series that I'm working on, Contil, it's I think I got this from my Nicaraguan background, and I can't deny my the grit of, like, and the persistence of my revolutionary family. I think that's by blood that it's in there. And like, one thing that Nicaragua they teach is subliminality, right? And you could be subliminal about the work that you're presenting, and
Right.
then people go, oh, and like, uh
Right.
we have to think about a way that we can. I don't want to preach to the choir either. I don't. I
Right.
I want to get my
Hmm.
work to some place where people can possibly just think. We got to be witness to our times too, as Rauschenberg said, and we can just where people can witness and say, maybe I can change one person's mind about something, or at least consider or ponder, or go like, don't you think that, and so that's one of the things that I think that my art has done, where people are like, I never thought about that. Or like, historically, even when they think about history, and the history is really important for me, research, uh, is just that's what I want to bring to the table in an era of misinformation. Do you know what I mean? Like when you see a work of art and then you go into the information that's there and it has strong basis and research, you're going to enlighten someone. You're going to give someone a tidbit of information that they didn't know. Not just about New York City, but about the world as we're seeing it. So I think is that we need to. I think it's a call to service now. It really is a call to serve our communities and find out where you best serve uh, with your work, with what you do, and it doesn't just have to be art. It could be documenting something. So I think that's I don't know if that answers the question, but that's
Oh, no, yeah,
what I
that was
have to
Yeah,
that
say.
I
was
think
yeah, me too. That was a
I think
great
it's a great
answer.
answer. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I wanted to ask you about identity a little bit because, I think we're in an era of, number one, it's a culture war. So like, there's a lot of talk about identity, and I think that there's pluses and minuses when you're talking about identity. Like, I think the idea of being othered, being like, oh, I'm not American, or I'm American too. And what does it take to be? I think what you were saying about New Yorkers looking at your art and saying, I see that person. I am that person. I mean, that's beautiful because that shows you how much you are not like othered, like you are of this culture, right? And I think that's something that like Latino artists really struggle with is like, how do I retain my Latino identity, but also how do I also just be American, without like having a moniker of being a sellout. And then as a Latino artist, and you forgive me because now I'm rambling, but as a Latino artist, I do think that there's this like um almost like innate or indoctrination as that our art needs to say something. It needs to be political. It needs to be, it needs to have a message. Whereas I feel like other art sometimes doesn't feel that it really needs to do that. So I want to talk a little bit about your identity. Of course, Nicaraguan, of course, Washington Heights, of course, New York, of course, the United States. But how do you see yourself? And then how do you put that into your work?
Wow, I think it's really interesting that because today um, I was visited here at the space by family, paternal family, like long lost relatives that I haven't seen in a long
Wow.
time. And the interesting thing about identity, right, is that as Latinos, many, and I think many of us feel that way, is like, no soy de aquí, ni soy de allá. It's almost like, my history is of displacement more than once, like, it's wild to me because my wife was born and raised in America, and she's American, but we share now a history of sort of like a displacement, where like the fire happened, right? So but because I've experienced that more than once, that can affect your identity, where you feel like no soy de aquí, ni soy de allá. I'm not from here nor there, right? But I and then enter imposter syndrome, right? Like where everything you're doing, you feel like you're too American for this segment, and then you feel like you're too Latino for this segment, right? And like then there's the I didn't even think about these things until later that I started like, yeah, then you're kind of thrown to the side a little bit because you have a last name that is not like a
Right.
famous white sounding name or anything like that in art, right? So all these things do exist. But the interesting thing that I learned today, right, was when I saw these people, I realized that the best cure for that imposter syndrome, at least for me, was getting to know long lost relatives. And I get really emotional when I thought about this because I was emotional all day. But it's getting to know long lost relatives that share your history. Because what I realized from that visit is that yo soy de aquí y soy de allá. I am from here and I am from there. And I think that that's the
Right.
message that we need to think in our self talk. And that's the message that we need to put out there too. And I think my art proves it. If you want to question or challenge that I am from here and that I am from there, it's, you know what I mean? If this interview was about rock and roll history, I'm your man. And you'll be like, and I say that with pride, right? I say that with like, like I grew up on rock and roll. I love rock and roll. Like
Right.
and that is me. I don't have to reject that part of me because of, do you know what I mean? Like and so like that's what I learned today.
Yeah.
I was like, and then I was able to reclaim some of my heritage by just talking to these people today. And I was just kind of like, man, and it wasn't about them being
Yeah,
proud of
man.
you and what you did and what you've accomplished. It was more about this sense of like, wow, they get me. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's not a
Right.
lot of Nicaraguans here, and so like,
Connection.
yeah, that
Yeah.
connection where they were like, yeah, and they didn't see me as not from there, or like it was just this thing where I was kind of like, wow, this changed something in me, especially doing with the work that I'm doing now. So
That's amazing, Frank. That really is profound, and I do feel that way. Like Dominicans say un pie aquí, un pie allá. And I feel like I'm both those things. And maybe I'm not as Dominican as something, but I'm very Dominican, and I'm very American, very Dominican, very hip hop, very, like when you say you like rock, my brother was into rock. My brother's 10 years older than me, so he got me into rock, and Billy Joe. I love Billy Joe, right? So
yeah,
like I agree with you. We are all those things at once, and then they really can coexist, and they do coexist because New York City, Washington Heights, they put an imprint on your soul. You don't have to be Dominican, you don't have to be, but this place imprints you in a certain way. So that's really profound, man.
yeah. I mean, it's actually it's where you grew up. Washington Heights is where I grew up. It was you know what I mean? It's where I learned to dance. It's where it became all. It's also where I was this heavy metal outcast kid with long hair, and I got bullied, but I also gelled with other kids who were Dominican, who were into rock, who also got bullied because they had long.
Right,
So it was like it's all part of you. You have to, it's interesting because it is limiting in the sense that like we're talking about identity and our Latino identity, but the reality is, as beings, as human beings, right? What we are is three-dimensional. More than, you know what I mean? We're not just, and again, so somos de aquí, somos de allá, and we adapt. Like we not only adapt, but we
right,
also embrace, like different cultures. And I think that it's a thing where like the world. I think that's why people are also so nervous and terrified. It's because the world is it's becoming so universal the way I see it. Where like we're just influencing each other, right? And like we should celebrate the positivity of that as opposed to like fear, you know what I mean, the negativity that can bring, or like because it's just made up, that concept of like almost like contamination, if you will, like no, it's actually
right,
enriching a culture, because as Latinos we are a culture. We're not necessarily a race where like is this color, right? We got,
right.
dude, you heard Chinos speaking
Everything.
Spanish. They're like, and ignorantly, I go like, "Where you learn Spanish?" It's like, "I'm from Panama, man." Like, so like
Yeah,
it's
yeah. No
happened where like
shit.
even us are like, "Oh, my bad," right? Like it's like we have everything,
Yeah.
We're the
Mm-hmm.
reality, I
For
think,
sure.
and I believe that sort of fear and frankly the white supremacy that we see is this clinging to a fantasy, which I think for many hundreds of years was possible because in the United States, we were separated by oceans and we were there was a genocide that was being conducted, but now as the world becomes much more interconnected and as people get on airplanes and fly in and out, and they try to, there's this fantasy that people are coming across the border in droves, but really the majority of people who come to the United States and stay come on an airplane, and they're from all over the world. um but yeah, I think that we are the reality of what the truth of the world is, which is coexistence and intermingling of cultures, and the fear of that is what's the fantasy. So I appreciate that you bring your culture, your viewpoint, and that you're also out of no, not out of you weren't, you didn't decide to come here. Like you came because you had to be here.
No, I always joke. I always joke. I was imported.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
hilarious. That's hilarious.
But I
That's
think that
fascinating.
this is why this platform is important, because we need platforms such as this to reflect what you were just saying, that that you give us voice, that it's really important more than ever. Not just see, it's not just about the artists, it's about the voices that you are sort of magnifying by having a platform such as this one, right? Where like also people don't just see like, oh, it's about the guy that they're talking to. No, it's like they're seeing three brilliant minds interacting and talking about real life stuff that affects everybody, that affects people from all walks of life and all nationalities and all color. It's important more than ever, right? To put out content that also connects people,
Right.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
No, you
so
you're 100. You're so yeah. You're so right, Frank. You really are. And I noticed that with your social, right? Like when you do those reels, I really enjoy those reels of you making art and then you speaking over it, and just dropping jewels. And sometimes I feel like when you do that, I needed to hear that when it comes across my feed. You know what I mean? Like I know it, but sometimes you need to hear it, and that's where I feel like that. I love when you do that on social. I think your social is really impactful, and thank you for that.
I appreciate that, because it's really interesting. Sometimes when I keep those videos, I don't make those videos. I just, it's stuff I do and I keep them there and then I forget about them. I delete them. I take them down. I'm very like, right. And so, but then sometimes I like pop one. I'm like, oh, that's not bad. I should share that. And I share it, right? But I think what's interesting about that, and this is kind of a confession, right? I do that kind of self talk to fight the inner critic. That mean inner critic,
Mm,
right? And so
right.
it's a pep talk, and I tell people, like, don't think I'm this like wise guru that is taking you, like it's giving you not. No, I'm sharing my journey with you. What I'm saying there,
Yeah.
I call them notes to self, right? And it's like me giving myself a pep talk, because the inner critic that day is telling me otherwise, right? It's telling me all of the things that we're talking about here, that like we have to claim them, and uh we have to like definitely affirm our talent, our will to expand consciousness, right? Because I think that's what I'm doing as an artist. I want to just expand consciousness. I don't want to preach. I want to show my questions about the world, about
Mm,
issues that interest me. And I want to also, enlighten in a way by just expressing my journey, not by telling you, you should do it this way, especially in this era where like every other reel it's some pseudo guru or pseudo psychologist. And it's always like, how to deal with a person that's
mm,
doing this to you. And it's like, when did we come all victims? Like we talk to the guy doing it, talk to the guy,
yeah.
or the
Talk to.
person. Yeah,
Yeah.
don't be. It's always this thing like how to
That's
deal with,
hilarious.
like it's bizarre to me, and I think that sometimes the way you just said it, people have written to me and say thank you for posting that, because I needed to hear that. Like I was like,
Yeah, for
man, like,
sure.
yeah, again, I approach it as a service, as a PSA for people.
But it's funny as you work your things out, you kind of helping someone else at the same time, which is that it's like that. It comes you put paying it forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Frank, this has been a great interview, man. You have any last words that you want to leave the story the audience with?
No, I mean, I just want to thank you guys. This is really special for me, especially with the two of you, talking to you guys. I've always,
Likewise,
Led, I
brother.
don't have to say, I've always admired your
Likewise.
love for the community, for Uptown, how you represent. It's always been admirable. You were one of the first people I met really after 2014. I heard of you already, and then I was like, I ran into this guy, and like I'm talking. It might have been at a Noma event actually.
Probably, yeah. It
Yeah,
might have
but
been a number. That's right.
always so friendly. And then Octavio, I mean, like we go way back. That's like crazy. When I ran into Octavio, it was nuts. I was just like, this is not one person I expected to run into. Uh, in like uptown, right? And like so, it's interesting to me that it's this year for me has been packed with full circle moments, and they've been good full circle moments, and this is really special for me. And I think for people, they
Yeah,
keep it moving and move it forward. Like we have to
yeah,
continue rising, and people say "palante como el elefante," but I always say like rise above like the eagle. Like you just gotta keep on moving. Ser el sí se puede, porque podemos ser el sí se puede también. So we gotta keep going. We gotta
love that.
nurture one another. We gotta definitely inspire one another. Or our group, our community. But no, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us in this episode of Uptown Voices, brought to you by 181 Cabrini, your neighborhood bistro just steps away from the North Walk of the George Washington Bridge. Use the code Uptown Voices Season 1 for your discount. And to stay up to date on the latest in Uptown, you can follow Uptown Collective on Instagram, Facebook, and X. If you're watching Uptown Voices on YouTube, don't forget to smash the subscribe button and to give us a like. And don't forget, we also need financial contributions from listeners like you to produce, improve, and expand our content. To contribute, please scan the QR code on the screen or visit www.livingamericana.com. That's living without a G. Until next time, this has been Uptown Voices.